We're celebrating our 30th anniversary of the first e-commerce transaction. I've been on this 30-year journey of seeing all these trends come and go, all these bubbles come and burst, people raising money and not using the money well. So it's interesting for me as probably the archaeologist in the room here to talk a little bit about how we see the journey over all of these years. What really was D2C was only a term which kind of started, actually D2C goes back to 200 years ago when Sears were selling via their catalogs, etc. So D2C, by the way, is something that farmers were doing hundreds of years ago. So let's not get gung-ho that we invented D2C here. That's been going on for a long time, right? B2B has been going on as well for a long time. So we didn't invent it, right? But really the name D2C came around in 2000 and that was D2C 1.0. And D2C 1.0 was, you could tell it was D2C 1.0 because there was a lot of VC money going into it. Nobody was really focusing on profitability. There was a lot of brands like Allwords and Casper building these really big teams. Payroll was 20% of their revenue. Who today's got payroll 20% of their revenue? I mean, you would not be a business. That's why nobody's putting their arms up, because they're not in business anymore, right? So D2C was very characteristic of large teams, large TAMs, total addressable market. You go after as many people. Allbirds is a classic example. Everybody in this room has 2 feet. Allbirds said that's a pretty good market. We'll go after that. We can double the huge addressable market. That was characteristic. Not too many people made money. And a mistake that was made back then as well is they branched out into retail just because it was the thing to do it. And again, these guys were loaded with money. And they set up stores and they closed down stores. They went into B2B channels, didn't always really work out very well. Profitability wasn't really on their minds. Simon would have been pissed off to look at those P&Ls back in the day. Those P&Ls looked absolutely disastrous. Then we move on to D2C 2.0, which came later, which was a change. About 2015 or so, D2C 2.0 came along. Those companies were more bootstrapped. Slower growth, smaller teams, still had kind of heavy cost structures of about 12 to 15% of their revenue was payroll. So still pretty big sized teams, but at least they were managing the business profitably. At least they were using, because it was their own money. Another story as well, I've had 2 companies. One company I was VC backed, was a 4-year stint. We never made money in 1 quarter because it was VC backed. I had another company, 5 years, bootstrapped, self-funded, 100% me and my employees. Every single quarter we made freaking money. You know why? Because we had to. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to pay the rent. Otherwise my wife would be really pissed off at me. So it's kind of the D2C 2.0 year was more about, if it's your money, you're going to do different things with it. You're going to spend a bit more wisely. A lot of those companies were profitable until they had fixed assets, they had liabilities. It wasn't really the asset light model, which I'll get up to in a moment and some examples there. Then acquisition costs went through the roof. Then ad spend cost a fortune, and they hit hard times. And then we really moved on then to D2C 3, which kind of came out in 2020, approximately just after the pandemic, where it was more about be as light as possible. I remember, light as possible means your payroll is about 6%, 8% of your overall revenue. That will actually. Do you know who's a really famous example of who was doing D2C 3 long before anybody was doing D2C 3? That was Kylie Jenner Cosmetics. Famously, Kylie Jenner was doing about $600-700 million worth of revenue back around 2015-ish or so, 16-ish I would say. She only had 8 people on the books full time. It was only 8 people. You seem to know something here.
No, I was just going to say 400 million followers.
Because in the fall it was more, not people on the planet, but that was actually a really good example. So we're talking today about more modern examples of the creates and hollows, etc. as well. Kylie Jenner was actually a real pioneer in that, and she had a really light company with 8 employees doing 600 million of revenue. So that is really, and we got some a lot of financial heads in the room here that know how to model a business much better than me. But I think I can't delve into the business models behind the creates and the hollows. Obviously, as you've heard, there's more experts in the room here. But really, what this is going towards is more of a macro business model of asset light works. If you have 20% of your revenue is going to payroll, and you're committed to those people. If you have long leases on offices or warehouses, which is really the D2C 1.0 model, what happens when a pandemic hits? What happens if you need to be nimble and change onto a new channel? You just can't be nimble if you've got so many fixed assets in the business, which is why one fingerprint of DTC 3.0 is you really asset light. And again, asset light, being a bit of a historian here, asset light is not new. Asset light is how Starbucks grew. It's how McDonald's grew. It's how Marriott Hotels is the biggest hotel chain in the world, is because they don't own the hotels. They manage the hell out of it. They give you great service, but that building is not theirs. They come in and they manage it. So they're actually, compared to IHG and Hilton, Marriott is a much better model, because if there's a big issue, they don't have fixed assets. They're asset light. So I think the future we're seeing right now, until DTC 4 comes along, and we'll come back here in a few years and we'll talk about DTC 4, whatever that's going to look like. But really the Nimble model right now is be as asset light as possible, because another thing I've seen over the years as well, channels come and go. TikTok is a great channel right now. We're all talking about TikTok. We do all the fulfillment for TikTok in the US. But you've got to be multi-channel, because TikTok disappeared for us at the weekend. Lights went dark on our fulfillment business for TikTok at the weekend for about 12 hours. And then it came back because apparently a new president came in. He's got a different notion about how things work. But it was a very touch and go moment at the weekend. But who's to say in 73 days, TikTok may no longer be there in the US. What's your next channel then? What comes after TikTok? Because we've seen kind of channels come and go. So the more nimble you can be able to pivot onto, bounce onto Amazon, bounce onto TikTok, bounce onto retail, bounce onto B2B, bounce onto something else, bounce into different geographies as well. The more nimble you can be and the more asset light you can be there, the more longevity. And I was speaking with Trent from Kirk, who are longevity experts as well, it's not just people looking out for longevity these days, it's companies looking out for longevity, and that's going to be one of the keys going forward. I just want to wrap up here by saying that Tash and I are super excited to keep these events going, because our personal reflection probably was, we love the big events. We love when you can go to a larger event, like Tash had with DTC Live, and there's hundreds of people there, where you see everybody, you get to know nobody. So what we're excited about for these events here is that you'll see fewer people, but we'll get to speak with everyone in the room, and everyone will get to mingle and network, etc., etc. So super excited for that there. Hope you're enjoying it.